Welcome back to Untaming Masculinity, the podcast where we tackle issues relevant to men and their journeys to reclaim their masculinity. I'm Dan, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host and good friend, Brad. What's going on this morning?
Oh, man, it's one of those mornings where I woke up and I felt like I got hit by a truck. So life's good. Life is great. How about you, man? How are you?
Doing pretty good. It's the last weekend of gun season in New York, so I am trying to get some sleep today because I'm getting up at 2:30 tonight to drive upstate to hunt all day tomorrow and then just do an up and back. So that'll be fun, but looking forward to it.
Sure, you're amped.
Oh yeah, dude. I'm really excited for it. So today we got a special guest with us. We are joined by Johnny Loreti. By way of introduction, Johnny has competed in bodybuilding as a WBFF pro. He's a nationally ranked powerlifter. He's a BJJ practitioner. And when he's not doing all that, he and his wife own and operate a performance center in downtown Boston, focusing on personal training, rehab, and martial arts. And he's also a health and performance consultant. So welcome to the show, Johnny.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't we just start with you giving us a little bit more background on yourself, kind of how you got into the position that you're in now.
Yeah, so I'll try to give you it with a little bit of brevity. I went to college for engineering, and I studied civil with an emphasis on structural engineering. I did that at Lehigh University over in Pennsylvania. And then, around when I was graduating, it was like 2009, 2010. The labor market was still a little soft after 2008. And I wanted to do a little more schooling, get a master's degree under my belt. So I went to Northeastern here in Boston, pursuing my master's degree in structural engineering. And obviously, you guys could tell it has nothing to do with fitness. So
Right.
I was doing that, and I was a struggling grad student financially. So I started bartending. And before you knew it, I was making more money bartending and finding a little bit more fulfillment out of the food service industry than I was in my day job of going to grad school and working for an engineering firm. And then I was also bartending at night. So anyway, I eventually was like, I don't really enjoy doing this engineering thing. It was very isolating, sitting in a cubicle and not being out with people and interacting with them. And I really enjoyed the bartending. So I gave up the engineering career, much to the dismay of my parents. My mom was pretty disappointed, but it just wasn't speaking to me anymore. So did that, and I was in my restaurant career for a few years as a bartender, and then I started managing and moved up the ranks there. And what changed everything around was I was slated to move back to New York and open up a new restaurant. And the day that I was supposed to leave to do that was the day of the Boston Marathon bombing nearly 10 years ago now. I don't know if it was 2013. I think it was 2013. And I was supposed to leave on a plane that night and fly to New York, start training. And that was going to be my life. And bomb went off. And I was left to stay in the city and obviously deal with the crisis there with the employees and taking care of them, making sure that they're all right, and then getting the restaurant back together. So after that, it was kind of difficult to go back to that location, and it just never really felt right. It was like, God came down and was like, you're not supposed to do this. So I changed restaurants because, I wouldn't call it like PTSD or anything like that, but there was just something that wasn't comfortable about being there anymore, and went to a different restaurant. And I met a buddy, and he was like, hey, like you should go into fitness. Like you did sports in high school, college scholarship track. And I think you'd be good at it. So I was like, yeah, but you can't really make money doing that. I was like, no, he's like, you do. And he made good money. So I went back to school and studied, personal training, nutrition, and started, dabbling in training some clients on the side in addition to my restaurant job. Eventually met my wife at my restaurant job, and wound up getting fired for dating her, and was kind of forced to pursue my fitness career. So that's kind of like the long and the short of it. Threw a lot out there, but that's kind of how I got to even starting. And then it's kind of grown from there. And that was all 8 years ago.
So I got to ask you, why'd you get fired for dating your wife?
I was her boss. So
Oh, there you go. That makes sense.
yeah. So I don't recommend that guys do that unless you're going to marry her, because otherwise you ruin your career. But it was worth it. It was 100% worth it. And if I'm being honest, I may not have ever had the courage to leave my very secure salary paying job and go out on my own to pursue my real passion, which was developing at the time to be, a personal trainer and a health professional. But I had that little, or rather large push, and, not having any source of income. I was like, man, I need to get it together. I need to make this happen. And I did make it happen.
It's pretty cool how you went from one completely different, path to another.
Yeah, very different.
So one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on the show was when we were in Maine earlier this year, you gave a talk about the capable man and this concept of fitness as a way to develop a man's full capability in terms of his ability to provide, protect, and preside. Would you be able to kind of give a brief overview of that concept too? I mean, we don't necessarily have the time for you to go into your whole talk, but I want to dig into that concept of what makes a capable man and why fitness is important so much in a man's life.
Yeah. So let me know if you want to steer in a different direction, but I'll
Sure.
kind of start with saying that for me, when I was, in high school and going into college, like I was always a smaller, undersized kind of guy. I was always tall, but I was kind of skinny. And, I lacked a lot of confidence. And it wasn't until I started prioritizing, for me, it was weights, but for some guys, it could just be movement in general. It wasn't until I started prioritizing, working out and, lifting weights and really taking care of myself, where I actually gained the confidence to then do the other things in my life that I really wanted to do and step up and lead and not be so timid. So for me, it was kind of a step in the first step in the direction of everything else that which would lead me to be more effective.
Yeah, I like that word effectiveness. Right? How can we become effective as men? And there's so many guys out there. I think you came from a different background than me. I was the chubby guy, right? Who had to lose the weight. But the concept is the same. If you're out of shape, if you're not taking care of yourself, you're less capable as a man. And there's so many men out there who they're in that situation. They have no confidence. They don't feel capable. They can't get things done simply because they just don't choose to take care of themselves, or they don't know how to take care of themselves.
Exactly. And that's kind of what brought me to bring this to the table and present it, to Chris, who runs the events that I had the privilege and honor of presenting at. Was, I saw that my path, for me personally, the gateway was, lifting weights, feeling more confident. And then I started, gaining some more respect, from some of the men around me, where normally, as a smaller guy, and who knows, like how exactly what the feedback loop, like what came first. Was it the fact that I had a more commanding physical presence now because I was in a little bit better shape, or I was just carrying myself more confidently? But I saw that change, and that's what led me to think of this concept. And I was like, well, the foundation is really taking care of ourselves physically. And what I've noticed, and what you guys, I'm sure, have noticed, that it's not the only thing, the physical side of things, but it's often the first domino that's going to fall, and that's going to lead to a longer string of successes in a man's life. And it doesn't have to be lifting weights. It could be, running or climbing or rucking or something like that. But now what we see is we have we're inundated with information now on social media, especially Instagram, and we're seeing all these different, I like to call them like archetypes. We've got the archetypical, the hunter, the bodybuilder, the power lifter, and you have all of these people, and they're in the 0.01% of what they do. And us, I would say, we're not average men, we're above average men, and we're seeking excellence. And it's uniquely defined for each of us as individuals. How do we shape what we want to attain, as with all that information kind of coming at us? It's like, well, do I want to listen to the bodybuilder, the power lifter, or this guy, or who do I want to listen to? And we're left asking the question, like, what do I have to do to consider myself to be a physically capable man? Like, at a minimum, like, what should I be able to do? Like, should I be able to squat this, deadlift this, carry this weight? What skill sets should I have to possess? What do I have to physically put myself through in terms of feats of resilience and endurance? And what I just wanted to do was basically distill it all down and be like, all right, guys, like at a minimum, if you're not here yet, let's work to try to get to this standard. And once you're here, start specializing in other areas, work on other things. But I think that if we're going to call ourselves, effective men, we're in the group, the Iron Council, which has been one of the best things that's ever happened for me. If we're going to consider ourselves to be high caliber men, at a baseline, you need to have these physical capabilities, in my opinion.
So you hit on something early in your response there that I was going to ask you about. It's the concept of physical fitness kind of being that first domino and having a cascading effect throughout your life. I know from a personal perspective, I can definitely say that once I started really paying attention to my physical fitness, everything else kind of started to fall into place. Sounds like you had a very similar situation in terms of that. You spoke a lot about confidence, but was there anything else that started to really fall into place for you in terms of relationships or just, school performance or anything like that? I mean, you're a pretty successful guy now, right? You run your own business in one of the bigger cities in the country. And you've had some pretty big accomplishments in your physical fitness. How did you see that happen over time?
Yeah. So I think that one of the biggest things that, being physical fit and pursuing that teaches us is discipline. And that's a pretty basic answer. So I don't want to, only say that, but it does teach you discipline, but it's pretty, one dimensional, right? It's like, okay. And, I could be really, really disciplined in bodybuilding, for example, right? Done bodybuilding shows, and have been, somewhat successful there, but it's very one noted, right? So I think that you need to have a lot of self-awareness to be able to understand that we only have so much capital, right? In terms of time and resources and energy, how am I going to spread that capital around? And one of the things that I wanted to emphasize with this, this capable man talk, or the ultimate capable man, is how to take that finite capital that we have, and how do I distribute that so that I can be overall most effective? Because if I'm putting all of that energy into the physical realm, for example, if I'm just putting it all into bodybuilding, or if I'm just putting it all into powerlifting, we like to talk about, condition, calibration, connection, and contribution. I'm going to suffer in those other areas if I'm going 100% on the physical. But there are times that you have to do that, right? And I know, and I could tap into that amount of discipline and that amount of tenacity in other areas of my life, and also understand it's like, all right, like I can't go 100% here. I'm going to borrow a little bit from here, borrow a little bit from here. But the lessons that I learned in being disciplined and going towards those goals is that, number one, it's not infinite. It definitely has a cap. There's a capped amount there. But I know that I've got more than I initially thought. And I know that I could push myself harder in these other areas because I've proven myself to be disciplined and able to push myself in the physical realm.
That's awesome. What does that equal distribution look like for a guy?
I think that it's, like Ryan says, like balance. Ryan Michler says balance is a verb, and it's not always like a 25, 25, 25, 25. And I think that life happens in seasons, especially when you have, kids and a career, and you have your own goals and objectives and things in life that create meaning and fulfillment for you, that you're always going to have to think about that distribution and be conscious, right? Like we are very, goal and planning oriented and tactical oriented, and understanding that there are certain times where you're going to have to put a little bit more capital in one of those areas. And I think it all comes back to self-awareness, because, you may think that you're pretty balanced, but you're putting way too much energy in contribution. I have a lot of clients, and I talk to them about them like, yeah, like you're putting too much, effort into work, and that's not your only identity. Your only identity is not to be a provider. You have to worry about these other areas too. So I think it depends. And I think it depends on, the man and the seasons, and he needs to understand like where he needs to show up and where he's going to be most effective.
When we see men who have not paid any attention to their physical fitness, and they're just trying to get back on or get onto this path and figure it out, it seems like a very daunting thing to go from years and years of abusing your body and not exercising and being out of shape to being in whatever their version of ideal physical fitness is. How do you suggest men get started on that journey?
It's a good question. I think that they, number one, just need to do something. They need to get started doing something, whatever that's going to be. And I think that, well, not that I think that what I do with my clients is I want to give them the minimum effective dose, because whatever they're going to do is invaluable compared to the perfect program that they're not going to do. So I would rather shoot very reasonable in terms of goals and expectations of performance and commitment, right? And not overwhelm them with all these different aspirations and all these different tactics that I want them to implement. I would rather go kind of middle of the road, because I want them to collect those wins, right? So in a more practical sense, I want them to just, move, right? Ideally, if you have the resources and you're in the position to do so, hire some sort of coach or trainer, or it could just be a buddy, right? You've got a local guy, a friend who, maybe he's already in really great shape and he could teach you a little something. You need to have a little humility in asking for help, right? But man, like who doesn't know a guy that's in shape that wants to help another guy get in shape? Like we all know, like plenty of guys. Oh yeah, like I'll help you out, or you want to learn how to hunt or something like that. Guys are more willing to help you than you think. You just need to have a little humility. So that's an option. Or you hire a coach, whether it be somebody in person, a personal trainer, or what's great about the internet now is there's a lot of guys that do online coaching or consulting. I do that obviously. And there's also a lot of great, free resources online, but that requires a lot of self-accountability and discipline. And you asked about like where to start. We're talking like somebody's on the couch and extremely overweight. They may just be best suited to just go out there and walk and just to get their body moving. And just commit to something, James Clear, Atomic Habits, put your shoes by the door, get out there and just go for a walk every day. Start there, do some body weight stuff at home, squats, some sort of modified push-ups, just anything to do to get your body going. And then, like I said, you have the ability to speak to somebody that knows what they're talking about, but you got to start today. We're in the middle of December right now, don't wait till January 1. I talk to people like, don't hit the pause button. Like we're just hitting play. Like there's no reason why you have to wait till Monday to get started or wait till January 1st to get started.
And along those lines, as you were talking about that, it made me think of the guy who's on the path, who's been going to the gym or who's been walking or running or whatever for the last month. They're not seeing that tangible progress. What do you tell those guys who are struggling to make that progress or struggling on their journey, who can't necessarily see the forest for the trees?
Yeah, it's tough. And I think, Ryan Mickler talked about this on his podcast recently. And, we want the results now, right? Like I wanted them yesterday. And so if someone's truly executing well consistently, I would say to them that they just have to give it a little bit more. One of two things. They either have to give it a little bit more time and be as objective as they can with themselves, look back to, an old picture that you took before you got started. Because you probably have made more progress than you think, right? Because you look at the same guy in the mirror every day. So that's why I tell guys, like, listen, it's weird. Maybe you don't like it, but take a picture of yourself when you start, because there are going to be those times where you're like, man, I'm not making any progress and I'm stuck. Look back to that, initial picture. So, one of two things, refer back if you truly are, executing. And if you're executing, but not as well as you could, maybe you just have to change up your tactics. Maybe you need to lift a little harder. Maybe instead of, running, you need to go and do something else. Try to have as an objective opinion as you can about that. Because the real reward is not at the end. It's really in the work that's being done. And so I tell guys, it's like, it's good to have the goal and the objective as a measurement point, but that can't be what we're seeking after. We have to be seeking after the daily wins of getting it done. Because if you put off gratification to the very end, you're missing out on winning every single day. Because when I get into the gym or the jujitsu mats or whatever and go out and exercise, like I relish in that activity every day. So every day I'm winning. I'm not waiting until like I get on the stage and win, or get on a platform or win or something like that. Like I collect those victories every single day. So I think that emphasizing that, what you're doing in the trenches, like that's the real work.
Yeah, that goes a lot towards the conversation of vision and milestones, and the concept of, you've got this vision out there, but there's going to be milestones along the way that you're going to achieve. And by achieving those milestones, that might actually change your vision. I know that me personally in my physical fitness journey, I'll hit certain milestones and my vision for that will veer to the left or to the right. I want to get a little more into cardio side of things, or a little bit more into the weight side of things, or whatever that looks like. And that what seemingly was a straight line path tends to do a lot of zigging and zagging along the way based upon those little victories that I got along the lines. To that end, I'd like you to talk a little bit about how you deal with vision and milestone with your clients, and how that changes over time, and how you kind of adjust mentalities there.
Yeah. So that's a really good question. So when clients come to me, in the beginning, they often at least think that they want to lose all the fat and they want to be really ripped. So we talk about that, and depending upon the client and depending upon how much they're going to kind of let me in the beginning, if I can, I'll try to distill that down and tease out really what the why is. And then as I kind of work with my client and I get them to where they want to be, my job is to then orient them towards, like you said, adjusting their future milestone and their vision. Really ask them, it's like, why are you here? Like, what is so good about being in the gym today, and how is that important to your health? And I'll ask them, what about this part of your physical fitness? Like, what does that speak to you as a man, as a husband? I train a lot of women, as a wife and mother, and how does this fit into that picture? And really get to the meaning behind it, because I have clients, we've got the Boston Marathon, and I want to go run the marathon. Why? Because your friends are doing it and it would be a cool thing to check off your list. But why is it on your list? What about doing that really grueling and difficult thing? Why is that important to you? And what does it say about you as a person? And try to help navigate them towards different things. I've got a mom of 3. She's competing in her first powerlifting meet tomorrow morning. She came to me at the beginning of COVID and was like, I want to do some strength training. I do a lot of circuit training, and I had been training her husband for a bit. And I was like, yeah, so we'll lift some weights. So let's put you on a barbell. Let's see what you can do. Within 6 months, this is like 130 something pound woman. She's deadlifting 200 pounds, no problem, which is not crazy. But this was just messing around, a couple of days a week. And so she came to me, wanting to, tone up, get a little stronger. And after 6 months to a year, I'm like, man, she's freaking strong. I was like, hey, do you want to be a power lifter? Do you want to go and compete? And she's like, I don't know. Do you think I can? I was like, yeah, like you're pretty damn good. And so, she squats over 300 pounds. She deadlifts over 300 pounds, weighing like 135. And she's going to compete tomorrow. So that was like an interesting thing to navigate. I know we're talking about men specifically, but this is a good example for men or women, or for anybody. And just letting her discover for herself that, she wants to be a strong, capable woman. And you could insert man here, obviously. But it took a little bit of just discovery along the way. I have examples for men too, but this one is more pertinent because she's literally competing tomorrow.
I imagine it's harder to get women to get over the powerlifting hurdle than it is to get men over that hurdle, right?
Oh, yeah.
From the competition standpoint.
Absolutely. And, I had, I could give an example of, I could give a lot of examples, but I had a guy come to me and he came in, he's my longest standing client. He came in like 8 years ago, 7, 8 years ago. And he was 49. He's like, hey man, just want to let you know I'm going to be here for 12 weeks, 3 months, a little jump start. I want to be in the best shape of my life before I turn 50. I just need you to help me get started. Well, 8 years later, and he's still here, right? But along the way, he got in really great shape, and he discovered that he really enjoyed the pursuit of crafting and developing his physique, and he was like, hey, I kind of want to do a men's physique bodybuilding show. And he's over 50 now, and he competed last year, and he did really well. But he didn't come to me ever wanting to do that. It was helping him discover for himself that he could have a little fun with his hobby, and it gave him more meaning, and it gave him a little more fulfillment to shoot towards that goal. But it wasn't about getting on the stage. It was about the process of putting himself through it and the discipline.
When you were mentioning the stories of both of those individuals, you mentioned the word discover 3 or 4 times. They had to discover this for themselves. And I'm drawn to this idea and this concept of the only way in which they were able to truly discover that is through getting started on the journey and doing the work. You don't always necessarily know what the end destination looks like. And going back to what Dan said, sometimes it zigs this way, sometimes it zigs that way. But the fact of the matter is that through that effort, they were able to discover exactly what they want. It comes through actually putting things into practice. And then from there, you're able to find what you want. So that comes back to what you said. You just have to get started. Mm-hmm. So the question I wanted to ask you is, I run into this a lot when I talk to guys, because I used to be bigger, and they're like, hey, Brad, how'd you lose weight? How'd you get in shape? I started in the gym. I started lifting weights. A lot of guys recoil almost instantly, I hate lifting weights. That's stupid, man. They're like gym bros. What would you say to a guy like that who is completely hesitant and reticent to this idea of lifting weights?
So, good question. Because what I would initially say is, I would say, well, have you tried it? And the answer is usually knee-jerk. Well, yeah, and I didn't like it, or I hurt my back, or insert some sort of excuse here, right? It's usually some sort of acute injury or some sort of lame excuse for some bad experience that they had. And I said, no, but have you actually tried it? Have you actually committed yourself to a program? And I'm not talking about some 7-day-a-week bodybuilding.com thing that's crazy, like 3 days a week. And have you actually executed? Not for a week or a month or 2 months, at least a quarter. Like, have you actually gone out and lifted weights safely 3 times a week in a program that is smartly designed, and have truly, number one, discovered that you didn't like it, and number 2, that it didn't work? And the answer is probably no, right? That, guys like, They open up like the Men's Health. I don't even know if people still do that or whatever. They go online, they try something, and they're like, oh, well, it didn't work after a week, and I'm still fat, and I'm sore, and I hurt, and all this other stuff. But they don't give it enough time. They don't give it enough time in the trenches to actually let them reap the benefits of all that work.
It's that commitment that is usually the biggest hurdle. I know one of the biggest gains that I got in my fitness career was just committing to like a starting strength type program, 3 days a week
100%.
for 12 weeks. And the strength gains I got over that were amazing from start to finish. So it is about commitment. It is about just consistency in that process. Johnny, you and I have a kind of similar background. I'm an engineer as well. So to that end, I'm big on data. And I know that you had talked a lot up in Maine about some of the different wearables that you use. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, maybe what you use, and then what you recommend guys at different levels in their fitness journey at least look at for using, and how that data can be used to tie back into, feedback into their fitness journeys.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm kind of a crazy person. On me right now, I've got an Oura ring, I've got a Whoop, an Apple Watch, a glucose monitor. So I wear those things, number one, because I like data and I used to be an engineer, but I also do it for education, right? Because guys like you, clients, they're going to ask me, hey, what do you think about this thing? Well, man, if I haven't used it, like, how can I actually tell you? I could read articles on it and educate myself, but like, I really want to use it. I could talk on this for a while. So I'm going to try to organize my thoughts on the fly. If somebody's just getting into fitness, I think, and I'm talking like couch to 5K kind of guy, I think that something as simple as like an Apple Watch or even a step counter just to measure their relative activity is great. talking like baseline, I think that's a really good thing because we just want guys to move more, right? If we're going from literally doing nothing, they work from home, the biggest walk they do is from like their bed to the office and they sit all day. Like measuring the steps that they do is actually pretty effective, right? And everyone talks about the 10,000 steps and it's pretty damn effective. So the Apple Watch will measure your steps, will also measure activity levels, active activity levels. So I wear one and I like it for that. It's pretty basic. It's not really great at tracking sleep, but I like Apple Watch for that. Guys that are a little bit more into a routine, like kind of novice level, I think that you could start looking into things such as, Whoop and, Apple Watch is okay, but it doesn't do sleep and HRV tracking as well as like a Whoop does or Oura Ring. And what Whoop and Oura do is they tend to track your recovery better than something like the Apple Watch, and they have very particular algorithms. And what I do is I wear them for myself just so that I could educate people, right? And so what it comes down to is I like them kind of similarly, and it goes back to what I said about programming is whatever people adhere to is going to be most effective. So some people, they do not like wearing things on their wrist. I don't mind wearing things on my wrist, but some people, they won't wear the Whoop. They won't wear their Apple Watch. That's why something like Oura could be great because it's a ring. It fits, right here. You can wear it to sleep. There's no like glowing green light next to your face when you're trying to go to sleep because your watch isn't on right or something like that. So I think that that's a great device, and I think that the Whoop is good. What I really like about these devices, and especially Whoop, is you could kind of track how your habits lead to performance. And this is where I really want to get talking about this stuff is, we plan, we talk about objectives and tactics and, am I getting to my goals? Are the things that I'm doing leading towards results? And every month I get a report from Whoop, for example, and it will show me, hey, when you go to sleep by this time, you're, obviously getting more sleep and you're getting higher quality sleep. When you eat late at night, you're getting worse sleep. Those are pretty basic things. I've had guys that were, having a couple drinks every once in a while, during the week. And when they realized that like one freaking drink the next day, their resting heart rate's up 10 beats per minute. Their heart rate variability goes down, which, by the way, like for those that are listening, like you want relative to you, high HRV. When it goes down, it's usually an indication of stress or something else that's affecting your environment. Like one drink will mess you up. And I've got a couple clients that have essentially quit drinking because they see like, man, like I'm spending money on training, I'm spending money on my nutrition, and now I have this very objective feedback telling me that this is not good. Like it is not pushing me in the right direction. And objectively, like you wake up, you're hungover, and like I know it doesn't feel good, but when you see it on a chart and like you're like in the red zone, and you're like, man, like why do I do that to myself? It doesn't mean they have to quit alcohol altogether, but maybe they're not going to have that one beer on Wednesday night or that second drink because they know how bad it is for them. So I really like the Whoop for that. And Oura has a similar journaling feature that I don't know if they came out with yet, but they're going to, because that's what sets Whoop aside from the other ones. And you could also look at things like melatonin, for example. Like melatonin supposedly helps support sleep, but for me, it actually made my sleep worse. So you could kind of test and see all these little things that we do. And I would encourage guys, like, pick one thing at a time. Like, don't change your whole regimen because then you can't track your variables, right? You're having all these unfixed variables that are changing. You don't know what's actually moving the envelope. I know I'm going on for a while, but then the last thing that I would suggest people to do if they're really into like the data, this would be like the next tier is you see a lot of people wearing continuous glucose monitors now. And now we're getting into the weeds of basically like metabolic health. So these devices, they're medical devices were designed for diabetics because we need to track their blood sugar and keep their sugar controlled. Now, what's interesting about that for the average person is, generally stable blood sugars levels are going to be better for overall health and better for body composition and so forth. What I found it useful is to see how your body reacts to certain foods. Basically, it comes down to if you're eating something like white rice. I think that white rice is fine, sometimes, and your blood sugar goes up to 300 and doesn't come down. Well, maybe you shouldn't have the white rice, right? And you could kind of go through this discovery. For me, what I found interesting is the impact that stress had on my body. So we all know your heart rate goes up, sweaty palms, whatever, but your blood sugar goes up from being stressed out as well. And I found that to be really interesting, that I discovered with some of my male clients, is that they're otherwise super healthy, but they're getting these weird blood sugar spikes. And so this one individual, I go, hey, what happens at 9 a.m. every day? And he's like, I get to the office. Why? And I go, well, your blood sugar goes bananas at that time. And that's because you're so stressed out. Now, we're not going to tell him not to go to work, right? But now he's aware that he's having, basically like a diabetic event every time he goes into his office. And maybe he's got to sit in his car, do some box breathing, maybe recalibrate his mind, somehow address this situation, because now he's got to worry about, too much cortisol and so forth. So anyway, could go down a rabbit hole there, but those are the things that I wear right now. There's a lot of devices out there, but those are things that I like, and kind of a sliding scale of how I'd kind of get people into them.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm a Whoop wearer as well, and I was amazed at how much just one drink really kind of screwed up everything. I've basically stopped drinking because of that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's crazy. I wanted to ask you a personal question. So for somebody who's feels like they've got their training pretty much on lockdown, but diet is really the issue, it sounds like that glucose monitor is something that will really give you a way to hone in on what's working and what's not working for you personally in terms of food intake, and what's causing variations in your response to your diet. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think that assuming that other things such as total caloric intake are controlled, and macronutrients are being eaten in the appropriate way, assuming that those things are in control, the next thing I would move to is like meal timing, and you could look at your blood glucose. I think that would be like how I would, in hierarchical order, address those things.
I was actually a little curious about the meal timing that you were talking about.
Yeah.
What does that look like conceptually for a noob?
Well, for a noob, I would say it doesn't matter, because, if we're going through, like I said, like in a hierarchy, like number one, we've got to worry about calories. And this is kind of like adjacent to that, maybe slightly below that is macronutrient intake and kind of optimizing that. And by optimizing, I really mean to make sure that number one, you're eating the right amount of calories. And then number two, making sure you get adequate amounts of protein. I see that more for women than men, but there are a lot of guys that don't eat as much protein as they think that they do. And you need a good amount to sustain you. You don't need, as much as a gram per pound, which is kind of the accepted, but there's also very little, if any, disbenefit to eating a little bit more protein. It's kind of one of those, I'm not going to say it's the magic macronutrient that you could eat unlimited amounts of, but if there was one thing that you're going to overeat, in my opinion, I'm not a doctor, but protein is kind of it for most guys. So back to nutrient timing, I think that, the society's kind of gotten intermittent fasting a little wrong, because we went from getting the real data, which, by the way, was mostly taken from people who were obese and not active, and applied it to generally, like, well, at least my clients are very healthy people. And what they did was they're like, oh, I got to eat within this window. And so what they do is they just skip breakfast, and they think that they're doing themselves a favor because, well, I'm doing this intermittent fasting thing and I'm just going to skip breakfast. Now, we're most insulin sensitive in the morning, meaning that you could have the same meal in the morning as compared to the evening. And assuming that, like, let's say that you didn't work out that day, for example, and you're going to have very different blood sugar responses. So, what Dan was saying, like, you could have a certain meal in the morning and your blood sugar will go up to, let's say, 100. You could have that same meal in the morning. This is not guaranteed, but have that same meal at night and maybe it goes up to 150, because the way that your body is regulating, insulin and cortisol and melatonin, your body is more adapted to absorb that meal in the morning than it is in the evening. And what's great about lifting weights and exercising is it improves insulin sensitivity, which is basically what diabetics struggle with. So going back to intermittent fasting and all of that stuff. So I encourage all of my clients to eat a really hearty breakfast, and then to also prioritize their eating around their workout, because I want them to be adequately fueled before. Their biggest meal ideally should be after that workout. If you work out at night, we'll have a different conversation about that. But assuming you work out in the morning or during the day, like one of your biggest meals should be after your workout. And then you should strive to finish eating as early as possible later in the evening, because, cortisol goes down, melatonin goes up, your body's getting ready to sleep. We read, Sleep Smarter, and that was a great book. And that's something that he really gets right. Scott Stevenson, is that you should really prepare your body for rest at night. So, long-winded answer, but try to get in more of your calories earlier in the day, hearty breakfast, and prioritize calories around your workout.
Those are some great tips.
Assuming that everything else is in line, right?
Yeah, you
got the guys like, I'm doing all this, but I'm eating too many calories. It's like, well, now all that other stuff doesn't help, because we need to have these things fixed and then go down the line of hierarchy.
Right. So here's one last question I did want to ask you in relation to calories. You mentioned that one of the ways that most guys get started is MyFitnessPal, tracking what they eat. What are some tools? What are some resources that guys can leverage to help really understand how much they should be eating? Because there's so much information out there.
Good question. So I do metabolic testing here. So that would be the best way and the most data-driven way. We're talking about data and science and results, where you wear a mask, and I've got this black box here, and it connects to your face. You lay down, and we're capturing exactly, sorry about that, how many calories that you're burning at rest, exactly how many carbohydrates you're burning, exactly how many fat calories you're burning. And I know that that's your resting, metabolic rate, your basal metabolic rate. From there, I can then determine, how many calories you should be eating. Now, outside of that, the best way to do it really is, if you're, regular guy and you're just trying to get on the path, is keep a food journal. And if you can quantify that by either eating similar foods and, doing the best you can to objectively measure how much you're eating, then you have an idea of like, all right, like these are the foods I ate throughout the week. Measure yourself. Am I losing or gaining weight? Let's say we're going a little bit more data driven and you're doing MyFitnessPal. Let's say you're going to log your food and you're disciplined and you're eating 2,500 calories a day, and you start off the week at 190 and all of a sudden you're at 195. It's a pretty extreme example. I'd probably do over the course of like 2 weeks, but you're probably eating too much, right? You're overeating, you're gaining weight, assuming that's not your goal, right? If your goal were to be weight loss. So I think you need to figure out a way to establish a baseline, whether that be getting a metabolic test done, which is probably going to be hard to do for most people, or logging their food, keeping a food journal, which would be an easy way to do it without tracking the calories, or more ideally, going through something like MyFitnessPal, understanding exactly how many calories they're eating throughout the week and seeing what's happening to their weight. You may need to figure this out over the course of a couple of weeks or something like that. But that's how I would do it. And you're going to have to change that over time. The amount of calories you're eating now to lose weight is going to be different after you lost 10 pounds, and people get stuck and their metabolism starts to slow down a little bit. And actually at some point you kind of need to eat more calories to improve your metabolic function before you try to cut down again. And that's like a whole nother conversation. But at the end of the day, you need to, try to, fix your variables, fix how much you're eating for food and see what's happening to your composition, your body weight.
All right, Johnny, I know you got a hard stop here coming up, so I want to be cognizant of your time, and thank you for coming on. I want you to let the guys know where they can find you. Yeah,
totally. So I'm mostly active on Instagram, and not even crazy active, but I'm mostly active there. Me personally, Johnny Loreti on Instagram, and my facility here is Back Bay Fit. And finally, I'm going to be launching a new consulting service in the new year called Valence, VALENC, like valence electron, basically the power of cohesion of things kind of coming together. So, looking for me personally, Johnny Loreti. And guys, I really appreciate you bringing me on. And I'd encourage guys to, physical fitness isn't the only thing, but it's something that we can't ignore as men. And there has to be a certain baseline that we should attain to have and possess. And I truly believe it's going to be something that's going to propel you in all the other areas. And you have to have that awareness, right? You need to understand, like, am I pushing too hard, right? Am I too invested in this area? Am I neglecting other areas of my life? And that's something that I really want to emphasize with people.
That's awesome. We'll get links to all that on the website. I'll definitely have to look you up next time I head back up to Massachusetts. Maybe we can go get a workout in at your place or something. Yeah,
man, would love that. Come out, work out. If you do jiu-jitsu, we've got BJJ here and Muay Thai and stuff like that. If you want to get a body fat test, I've got a DEXA scanner here. I've got all the fun stuff.
Awesome. So. Awesome.
Nice.
All right. Thank you guys all for listening. Remember to check us out at untamingmasculinity.com. You can find our show notes there for this and all of our other episodes, as well as links to our social media. We'll have all of Johnny's information up there as well. If you find value, please give us a rating and review on your podcast player. That helps us spread the word to everyone, and it helps us help other men. So finally, make sure you come back next week. We have lined up a handful of great interviews coming up here. So I think you guys can be very happy with that. And until then, we will leave you with just one question. What are you doing to untame your masculinity?